This episode will be full of harrowing, cautionary tales about how to destroy an aircraft without destroying the aircraft. I'm Paula Williams, an aviation marketing consultant with ABCI, and you're watching or listening to Contrails and Cocktails. Of course, whenever you get two or more very smart aviation people together in a room, the stories are going to start flying. And when you start mixing cocktails, things start to get really fun. So we wanted to recreate that experience in a podcast. Our guest this week is Larry Hinebaugh. 20 years ago, Larry's maintenance consulting company, the Aviation Consulting Group, was in full swing, having already been an A&P for over 2 decades, including several years as a field service rep with Gulfstream Aerospace, being the director of maintenance for Caesars World Flying Department, and accomplishing multiple VIP aircraft installations as a customer representative. He found himself doing what every independent VIP aircraft maintenance consultant at the time does, auditing aircraft logbooks, looking for information to prove its airworthiness and value on behalf of a potential buyer. And he hated it. Why are aircraft logbooks so difficult? So fast forward to today, and many aircraft logbooks later, Larry still feels the same way, only now he's spoken with enough aircraft maintenance people to know that he's not alone. In fact, most maintenance people involved in regularly researching and auditing aircraft logbooks and records truly hate logbooks. Why? Because the condition of logbooks is almost always horrific. The administration of aircraft records, it seems, is only a necessary evil in the minds of maintenance technicians, and so it is treated as such. And of course, there are many reasons why this is true, but none is truly justifiable. With an average set of aircraft logbooks proving time and time again to be valued as much as 30 to 50% of the value of an aircraft itself, and with both the safety and the airworthiness of the aircraft dependent on them as an industry, we should find this completely unacceptable. So Larry formed the Foundation for Business Aircraft Records Excellence, or BAR for short, Business Aircraft Records. For it is truly excellence in aircraft record keeping that should be the goal of our industry. With that in mind, his intention is to improve aircraft record keeping practices through professional education and technology awareness. And he believes that improving aircraft record keeping will not only benefit business aviation, it will, in the end, also enhance the image of the aircraft maintenance professional. Contrails and Cocktails, of course, is sponsored by Global Aircraft Group. Global Aircraft Group offers desktop appraisals, expert witness, and pre-buy inspections. The founder is located in New England, and he travels free of charge to anyone in New England who has a situation that needs his services. And that might be an aircraft appraisal or an aircraft transaction or an estate statement, a divorce, a legal situation, something requiring his services as an expert witness in a court situation. Whatever it is, if it's a problem involving aircraft values, Mark can solve it. Mark Perry is the president and founder of Global Aircraft Group. He has many years of experience in corporate aviation and a diverse roster of clients. He has unparalleled access to professional resources, which helps the organization achieve positive returns on his clients' investments and capital. Prior to establishing Global Aircraft Group, Mark worked for Bombardier in numerous capacities, including sales, maintenance, completions, pre-purchase inspections. He was employed by Lockheed Advanced Development Systems, which is better known as the Skunk Works, under Kelly Johnson. Mark holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Massachusetts in management and is the senior certified aircraft appraiser and member of the Professional Aircraft Appraiser Organization, or PAAO. And lastly, he's a licensed airframe and power plant mechanic. Mark also studied at the Massachusetts School of Law in Andover. So you get legal and technical all in the same guy. So without further ado, let's get these very smart people in a room and see what happens in this episode. Okay. Welcome to this week's episode of Contrails and Cocktails. I'm Paula Williams with AVCI. We help aviation companies sell more of their products and services. And we are here today with two of my favorite people, which is going to make it a really fun conversation.
It's Mark with Global Aircraft Group. I do certified aircraft appraisals, expert witness, museum evaluations, IRS aircraft evaluations, and aviation insurance claims.
Fantastic. And our guest this week is Larry Hinebaugh.
So I'm Larry Hinebaugh. I'm working with Paula right now as the executive director of the Foundation for Business Aircraft Records Excellence. I started that nonprofit after spending many years working on another company, which is electronic logbooks. And that was a result of my aviation career, being an A&P mechanic since 1976. And independent, I've done everything that is the normal maintenance independent route of tech appraisals, pre-purchase inspections, a lot of logbook audits, aircraft completions, heavy maintenance programs, that type of thing. So all of that led me to where I am today, which is frustrated with the current affairs of business aircraft records and maybe trying to do something about it anyway. Maybe we'll be successful. We'll see.
Right. And Mark, I'm sure you've had frustrations with logbooks as well.
Yeah, I reviewed a lot of them. 1,000 years worth.
That's fantastic. So, Larry, maybe you could bring us up to speed with what's happened recently about aircraft records. I mean, what's the latest?
Okay, so before I get started, I have to tell you, Mark, I wrote an article, it was an AMT magazine last issue, and it was about the state of logbooks and how we got to here. And I called people just like you, because I also would audit and correct logbooks. I called them merchants of airworthiness that can prove an airplane is airworthy, but there's not a whole lot of people in the world that can actually look at a logbook and glean all the information it needs to prove that. So a guy actually called me up and he said, I don't know whether to love you or hate you, merchant of airworthiness, but I think I'd go against that phrase. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that.
Merchants of airworthiness. That is actually a good phrase, I think. You're making a determination, right? You're making a judgment. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, the classic one is just exactly what Mark's doing, is going in and auditing the logbook and pulling out everything you need to do to prove to somebody that the airplane's airworthy. Mm-hmm. On a pre-purchase inspection, which I got involved in a lot, it's of course proving to a buyer that he's buying an airplane that he can fly and not that's going to sit in the hangar. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So,
I guess, as a layperson, thinking about this, if I have an airplane that I want to sell, I'm thinking more about, the condition of the airplane. But Mark might make a judgment about that airplane and say it is worth half as much as it would have been because of the state of the documentation. Has that ever happened, Mark, that you've seen?
Well, occasionally lost logbooks depending on the age of the aircraft is a problem. Mm-hmm. The other thing is they do the damage, any kind of damage is literally almost never mentioned, very seldom. Mm. So a lot of times I'll pick up a problem with an engine, and then if I go back into the airframe on that same date, then I'll see, landing gear was out, 10 or 15 skin changes. That kind of thing. So it will never say, you have to go into. So I also do a 337 search, looking for 337s that match up, and I do NTSB accident report search also. Mm-hmm. Make sure the aircraft wasn't totaled. a lot. And there's 4 different ranges of damage, so it's not something to really be afraid of per se. But you know the buyer, your client wants to know. He needs to know that info, and boy, it really gets buried.
Right.
It's Larry, always hidden.
Mm-hmm.
We did a sort of a casual survey, not a real formal one, but we called a lot of different large law firms around the U.S. that do a lot of aircraft, acquisitions and that type of thing. And the common number kept coming back that about 1 out of every 5 sales has a logbook problem that they have to do. That's a pretty considerable number.
1 in 5.
1 in 5.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Plus liens. I don't really do that as much in the appraisal process. So make an assumption that its aircraft is lien free, but on the sales side, you pick up a lot of liens also. Right.
In working with Larry, he has some really great stories about things that have happened with aircraft logbooks. I don't know if you have a favorite or 2 that you'd like to share.
I don't know. You're right, Paula. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of stories about logbooks and the damage that they've caused a cell or an individual or whatever. But the one that came up recently was the story, and it's getting pretty old now, but it was about a VIP 727 that, back, this was 20 years ago, the airplane still had quite a bit of value, and it was a very nice 727 set up with aux tanks and a VIP interior and winglets and all that. And it was going through a C check. And so they were out running the airplane close to the hangar, and they didn't realize that they had not selected the hydraulics on for the brakes. And so they ran it up, not to full power, but enough power that it jumped the one and only chalk they had. And the airplane started careening into the hangar, and they had no brakes to stop it. So the airplane ran right into the side of the hangar. And it did the radome, and it did the radar unit, all of which were repairable and going to be, the airplane would have been fine. But on the other side of the wall of the hangar that the airplane hit was the inspection office. And when the airplane pierced the hangar, it pierced the water line for the fire suppression system. And so all of the records were drenched in water. And by the time they got the water turned off, the records had been ruined. And so even though this was an airplane that still had quite a bit of value, they ended up totaling the airplane because they just couldn't put back all the information that they needed, the history of the airplane. So here we have a perfectly good 727 totaled from the lack of logbooks.
It totaled itself. I mean, that's the hysterical thing about that story, or the tragic thing about that story, I guess, depending on how you're looking at it. It didn't even hurt itself that bad, but it hurt its own logbooks to the point where they were unusable. That's a great story.
There's always, there's all those stories. I'm sure Mark's experienced it too. I mean, it's that want to take care of the logbooks because the airplane's in a pre-buy, and then they end up leaving them in the trunk of the rental car and they're lost forever. Or I can't tell you how many pre-purchase inspections I've done where a piece of paperwork that justify a life-limited item on the airplane can't be found, and so that item needs to be changed. Makes for an expensive sell for the owner. Of course, they usually don't really realize it because it's in the noise of the rest of this stuff. But those airplane parts are pricey.
Right.
Replace it because you don't have a piece of paper is a tragedy.
Right. Or there have been situations where logbooks have been held hostage over a dispute or a disagreement, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually what got me started in the converting paper to electronic. Is I was doing some 135 conformity work actually for Clay Lacy, and I found out that I could, scan these records and text search them and really increase, my efficiency at this. I could find, 80% of the information I could find in 4 hours instead of 4 days. But Clay said, you're backing up those records? And I said, well, yeah, actually I am, because I'm making electronic copies. And he said, let me tell you this story about this Learjet in my hangar. And he had a Lear 35 that he had bought at auction because it had no logbooks. And he paid, this was many years ago too, but I think he paid like $600,000 for a Lear 35 back then. And he was going to part it out. But before he had a chance to get his maintenance people after it to part out the airplane, he got a phone call from somebody that said, I understand you're the owner of serial number so-and-so. And Clay said, yes, I am. And he said, would you like the logbooks? I said, what do you mean would I like the logbooks? I bought that airplane at auction because it had no logbooks. But you had the logbooks? And this guy said, well, yeah. I mean, I'm a 145 repair station doing maintenance on the airplane. They came and repossessed the airplane right out of my hangar. And he said, ever asked me for the logbooks? And he said, you know what? I'll give the logbooks to anybody that's willing to pay the maintenance bill.
Oh my gosh.
They paid a couple $100,000 maintenance bill and ended up with a set of logbooks. And I mean, this was 10 years ago that I did this work for Clay, but at that time, that airplane was still flying. Clay had it in 135 service for probably 5 or 6 years.
Oh my gosh. So he got like 5 or 6 years of charter out of this airplane that was unflyable.
Yeah. And for all I know, he's probably still using it.
Oh my gosh. That's crazy. I mean, I know you've written a lot about, why people do this or why people overlook the logbooks, but I guess, it's just like the last thing to be thought of and the last thing to be done in any transaction, right?
Yeah, I mean, my experience is nobody wants to think about logbooks or look at logbooks or have anything to do with logbooks until all of a sudden they become almost the most critical thing there is in the sale of an airplane.
Oh, yeah.
Probably when you go to appraise an airplane, the first thing you say is, I'm going to need to look at the logbooks.
Mm-hmm.
And probably people haven't looked at those logbooks for years.
Right.
Yeah, I did a legal case in general aviation where the guy who owned the repair station, they were just doing runway work, and somehow his clients, someone took them. They were gone. And it was a 182 turbo, wasn't it? But still, he was being sued by the owner and cut the value about 40%. They did have quite a few records, so they had made it airworthy, rebuilt. They had gone back about a year or so.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was still flying the aircraft, but as far as I know, he went to court and had to make up the difference, or his insurance company did. It was at least 40%, depending on the aircraft's 40% of the value. Well, I was curious, Larry, on the like your business jets and stuff that are on camp.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be, they have those records already through camp. It would be a little bit less of a problem.
Well, see, that's really a dynamic question, Mark. Believe it or not, I get asked it a lot. First of all, as far as just the camp goes, if camp said, this AD note was complied on such and such a day, the FAA says that's not acceptable, right? The only thing that proves that an AD note was done on an airplane is a Part 43.9 logbook entry. And so, camp is as good as the input, and so it's not necessarily reliable, and the FAA won't rely on it at all for anything. So now take the next step and you say, well, okay, these guys are, some of them, especially now in today's world are scanning the logbooks and sending the scanned images off to CAM. And the problem with that is you have now made an electronic copy. So you're still under compliance with Part 43 with respect to a copy. And the FAA does not consider an electronic copy the same as original. It's actually of no value at all unless it's kept in the security system. And Advisory Circular 120-78A is the FAA saying, here's the same kind of security system that we want to see the record. So if this is something that you had a maintenance event, you had control of, you were there, and you want to print a copy, and you can, as an A&P mechanic, testify that the copy is exactly the same as the original, you're okay. But if you can't do that, that copy is valueless as far as the FAA is concerned.
So what's the best thing to do to prevent these kinds of problems, or what's the best way to go about this if you have an aircraft that has records from heck to breakfast and everything in between? What's the best way to go about ensuring that aircraft's value and getting it all together and making that all happen?
So the only guaranteed way to do this with paper is to have an A&P mechanic there when it's scanned that can testify that the scanned images are the same as the electronic images are the same as the paper images, and then put all those electronic images into an AC 12078A compliant computer
electronic record system, right?
And sending them off. Email to camp is not doing it. Keeping it as a PDF on your PC in your office is not doing it, and it needs to go into a secure system. So that when it comes back out, you don't have to worry about, was I there? Do I know that's a copy of the original for sure or not? An A&P mechanic testified it went into a secure system, and so it's going to be secure coming out.
Yeah. Cool. And there are some companies that do this. I don't know if we want to mention any names of any companies that do this, or.
Well, so I started doing this, I guess, it was 20 years ago now. That company was Vlog. That's Paula and I got started together. I asked Paula to do some marketing for that company. That company is now gone, but it's changed. It's really changed. It's not necessarily gone. It's now Vision Aircraft Records. And it's a lot of people are realizing that it's a really good deal to have their logbook entries on the cloud where they can be accessed by anyone from any location. But there's also other companies. I knew Bluetail is doing this, something similar. There's Plain Logs. There's probably half a dozen companies out there that have electronic logbooks. That not all of them are going to cater to maintenance logbooks, which I think are unique in the world of logbooks. But because of the FAA's, Part 43 stuff that has to go into the logbook and that magic signature of an A&P mechanic. But it's becoming more and more popular. Of course, the thing is let's just go electronic logbooks. Forget this paper.
Yeah.
We have 100 years of paper we have to deal with. So
that's true.
Way.
So Mark, you do desktop appraisals. I assume that has something to do with, obviously they have to have electronic logbooks in order to make that work, right? Or
yeah, I don't do a lot of those. Usually they opt to have me go and look
the on-site, right?
The logbooks. But if you do, then you would have to. Someone has to scan those in.
Right.
Do it that way.
Okay.
And that is kind of the stumbling block right now, because scanning is not a difficult thing to do, but it's tedious and it's insanely boring. Most people in aviation have enough jobs to do that they just don't have time to scan records. So as an industry, we just keep pressing on, making more and more and more paper records and not scanning the information that's already there simply because there's not any time to do it.
Yeah. So people keep doing what they've always done because they don't have time to learn something different, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And you're putting a course together to change that, I think, at the beginning, as people are starting their careers. Do you want to mention a little bit about that?
Sure. Because that is a big thing with business aircraft records. So there's really two problems with logbooks these days. And Mark, chime in if you feel differently about what I'm saying. But the two problems are, one, the way logbooks look, because as many different individuals as there are going to do a logbook, that's how many different ways the logbooks are done. Because the federal aviation regulations, if you read them and you understand them, you realize they're very specific on exactly what content they want. But they don't tell you at all how to do it. So that's up to your own devices. And like I said, as many people as can come up with a way of keeping logbooks, that's how many different logbooks there are. So logbooks come in not just the books, but the pages inside the books, all different sizes, all different formats, all different ways of doing things. So that's one of the problems. The other problem is a lot of people don't really understand what is the necessary information. All of our training these days comes from tribal knowledge, right?
Yeah, from the DOM.
From the guy that, well, that guy over there will show you how to do those. And so a lot of the information isn't even that good. And if you're a qualified aircraft mechanic working on the airplane, the last thing you want to do is go down the street to a law firm to have them read the FARs for you so that he can tell you what they say, because they're written in government legalese. They're not written for, people to know what to do. They're very ambiguous. So there's that issue. So I'm developing training courses, not just for electronic logbooks. There's actually 10 modules. Only one of them is talking about the value of, converting paper logbooks to electronic logbooks. But the other 9 are all about the common documents we use every day. So 43.9 and 0.11 entries, right? 8130s, TCs, STCs, Form 3337s, all those things. I decided to put into a formal course because the more I investigated why logbooks are the way they are, the more I began to realize that there's no formal training on that. I mean, your average A&P mechanic that goes to school gets 1,970 hours of training, which is a data dump into the mind of a, young adult or
18-year-old, 19-year-old, right?
And of that 1,970 hours, everything from how you rebuild a piston engine to laws of aerodynamics, 30 hours is paperwork. So they learn enough that maybe the test question on one of their tests is about 337s and they can check the right box, but they don't really understand the paperwork. That's going to come when they get a job. And again, it's OJT, and maybe you learn the correct way. Chances are you learn the incorrect way.
Right.
I started these formal courses to take off from there. I'm not trying to compete with the 147 schools that are teaching this stuff. I want to say, look, here's the right way to do all these different things that you're going to be doing every day, using every day in aviation.
Right. And that can be OJT, or it can be, ideally in the course when they're before they become dangerous and part of the world and part of the ecosystem.
I actually had maybe 2 years ago, I had a phone call from a director of maintenance on a 135 operator that had 13 airplanes. So it's a pretty significant guy.
Yeah.
I'm of 13 airplanes. He called me and he said, I need to understand 8130s better. I mean, which ones am I supposed to be keeping in the part of the record? And, which ones can I let go? All of my 8130s are in manila folders attached with work orders. I'm confused. So let's have a conversation about it. Talking about 8030s, which I think is a really dynamic conversation because a lot of people don't understand them. And Mark he just hit on why. An 8130 is a recommended document. It's not a required document from the FAA. For somebody that can issue it, it proves that the component is airworthy. If they have the authority to say that. If they don't, there's other ways to skin that cat, and so they do. And 40 years ago when I started in aviation, there were no 8130s. There were just serviceable tags, right? And if you had a major repair to do, you did it under 337 and you got a field approval. Fast forward to today, FAA wants to see 8130s.
Yeah.
They want to know that part was installed in the airplane was airworthy, and they don't want to give field approvals anymore because airplanes are very complex and they can't train their inspectors on how to handle every complexity of every airplane out there. So things that we took for granted 40 years ago, they're just getting a lot tougher to do these days. And a lot of people do them correctly. But as Mark pointed out, a lot of people see that as an opportunity to thwart the system too.
Yeah.
Going on.
Right. Never let a good opportunity go to waste if you're a good person or a bad person. There's lots of ways to exploit those. Move on to the cocktail hour.
Okay.
I'm really curious about this one. This actually, you started naming ingredients, and I'm going, and then, that might be actually kind of cool because sometimes things sound terrible and then they turn out to be really fantastic. So,
right.
Well, this is an early 1900s cocktail, aviation cocktail. It's making a comeback, and it was sent to me by a friend of mine. I joined the Old Saybrook Sailing Club this spring down in Saybrook, Connecticut.
Wow.
And really just, I have a small 15-foot skiff, and I like to kayak. So the group does all of that. But then if you volunteer or you're interested, they'll take you out on the big boats too. So it's been kind of fun. I've been out sailing a couple of times, and then the person that gave me this drink, we were talking about the podcast. She has her name's Pat Holinka, so I want to thank her. She has a yacht that she captains herself, and so anyway, she sent me this drink here. And so anyway, fantastic. Now my recommendation is that you have this made for you somewhere because the ingredients are expensive.
Ooh, okay.
So it's well worth. I think it'll be good. I've never had it before, but yeah, that would be my recommendation. So anyway, here we go.
That is a very interesting looking picture.
Yeah, I didn't. I told you I'm in Omaha, right?
Yeah, at your dad's house.
Yeah, so there's no shaker here. So I went over to my sister lives down the road, and this is what she had.
Mhm.
I want to cut this out. Anyway, you do this Empress 1908 Indigo Gin. There's a little bit of a purple color. And 1 second. So it's 4 teaspoons. Guesstimate on that. Pretty good at guesstimating.
You can tell a true bartender because they know their measurements in a standard glass.
Right.
No, you gotta
Science.
Yeah.
Then you do. So that's the recipe calls out for a gin of your choice with a creme de violet. I don't know how to say it. Creme de violet.
Violet?
Yeah. But if you buy pretty much for the same cost, the indigo gin is, you can do it that way.
Oh.
So you can do it either or. And then so it's four tablespoons of the indigo gin, 1 tablespoon of maraschino liquor.
Ooh. I love maraschino cherries.
Yeah.
John hates them. We get along great.
Yep.
Well, you get all the cherries that way.
I get all the cherries.
I'm going to hand squeeze 1.5 tablespoons of lemon juice. Ice, and that's actually it.
Well,
Give it a little bit of a shake in this thing again. More shaking.
can do the Tom Cruise cocktail thing, flip it behind your back and all that.
Yeah, I have one at home. This is like an antique.
That is really cool, actually.
Yeah. Oh, it made more than I thought. I'm gonna bring this over to my sister's house. Oh, plugging in.
Looks like it worked.
Yep.
And then you garnish that lemon. Well, it doesn't say to do the lemon, but I'm going to do it anyway.
It's pretty. It's a nice red, and the yellow goes with it really well.
Yeah, and then they're called Luxarado black cocktail cherries.
Oh,
Wild Italian.
yeah.
Armenian cherries. I tried one earlier. They're really good. Versus the those ones you typically get.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
If you look, these are like really dark.
I personally like the dark cherries. I'm not a gin drinker. I prefer bourbons and ryes, but dark cherries go way better with that than the
Yeah, I'm the same, to tell you the truth, but
that probably redeems the drink right there, is those cherries.
I wanted to do this one for my friend Pat. Took me out on her boat. I was kind enough to share this. So let me just give it a quick test.
This is the first time you tasted this, right?
Yeah. Not bad.
Cool.
It's not too sweet. I put a little, maybe too much. I'm not a gin guy, so I can pick the gin up. Yeah, it doesn't. It's not bad.
Great. Well, cheers.
I've got his coffee.
There you go. It's before 5 where we are. It's after 5 where you are. So
there you go.
Now, I would recommend that. I would recommend that at a restaurant with a steak.
Nice. And then you can get them to do all this with all of the expensive ingredients on the back bar and not have to buy them all yourself. Smart.
Yeah, definitely.
It's actually that's kind of a popular aviation drink anyway. Like you say, it's got an aviation name, but I'm not a gin drinker either, but there is a gin called Aviation Gin. Mm-hmm. And I've always seen that as the gin part of that drink. But I think you'll find that in a lot of the more finer restaurants that cater to the aviation crowd.
Exactly. The Ryan Reynolds gin.
Yeah, it's not too bad.
That's fantastic. Well, I really appreciate it. Let's just go around one more time and tell people where you can find us. And we'll also have the recipe for the drink so that people can get that on the podcast. So.
It's Mark Perry, Global Aircraft Group, out of Bradley International in Windsor Locks, Connecticut. Cover all of New England and the U.S. and internationally. As a certified aircraft appraiser, expert witness, insurance evaluations, IRS evaluations, and aviation insurance claims, and pre-buys.
Again, Larry Hinebaugh, I'm the Executive Director of Foundation for Business Aircraft Records Excellence, just Business Aircraft Records for short. We have a website, www.businessaircraftrecords.org, because we are a 501c nonprofit. But there's a lot of articles up there. There's some templates for AD Matrix 337s, even logbook entries, that type of thing. We do the tips of the week, which is something we put out every week on Facebook and LinkedIn on how to do a particular maintenance entry a little better or something to think about. So we're all about just trying to get the industry to improve the way we do business aircraft records.
Absolutely. And Paula Williams, ABCI, we help aviation companies sell more of their products and services. So thanks, you guys. I think this was a great episode. I'm really happy we made this one because this one is a really natural fit, I think.
Thank you so much, Larry.
Thank you, Mark, for writing.